It is a gorgeous spring morning, finally. So, and let's talk about finding your voice. And it's interesting. It took me a very, very long time to find my voice. As a matter of fact, one of the big challenges that I had growing up is that I really felt like I had no voice. And in very, very dramatic ways, that I literally was voiceless. And, when you grow up in any kind of environment where you're not affirmed, or where false versions of you are affirmed, so you don't really get to be who you are. And to some extent, that's most of humanity. If there's trauma, if there's abuse, a lot of times people lose their voice. And it's interesting sometimes sometimes how that expresses itself is that people have no voice and just clamp down, which was kind of me. And then other people, they just are constantly fighting, and they're screaming all the time. They find that they're screaming all the time. And so, and I had zero voice, and I just screamed inside. And so, it's interesting. And then there are all sorts of false ways of being that we learn that are in our society. Certain things are valued, and certain things are really not valued. And we learn these. We learn how to navigate our environment, what is expected of me. And, it's really sad when so much of our survival mechanisms are based on being people who we're not. And so that's a lot of healing process. Sometimes it's just plain confusion. And, it's not always, that people are trying to steal your voice or that kind of thing. And people are broken, and they don't know what they don't know. And sometimes they don't know how to foster you. I mean, I don't know if any of you have had the experience of, you've got these amazing kids, but they baffle you. And so you want to support them in who they are, but you're like, I'm so baffled. I just don't even know where to start. And we just do the best we can, don't we? And that's if we have a good heart. If we have a bunch of brokenness and toxicity, it's that much harder. So let's talk about this. So you were uniquely created because you are unique. You have a unique voice, and you have a unique message on your life. Now, it's everything we do, because we're created. We have things in common. We're created in the image and likeness of love. But wow, how big is love? It's as big as the person of God, right? And as that expression, what does that look like? And then how do we walk that out? And so fulfilling your purpose requires that you find your voice. Find your voice if you've lost it, or find your voice if you thought your voice was this, but it's really not. And sometimes, we're in the process, and so we kind of have glimpses. I think it's kind of this, but this doesn't feel right. And we have to try a lot of different things on. And that's really what the process is of really being awakened to who you really are, to what your true identity is. And, you see this the most dramatically in teenagers, right? Because they're trying things on all the time, right? The challenge is when we've never really settled this, and we go into adulthood and we still haven't gotten it right. And we're chasing after certain things that we think are going to be life to us. And then in order to get those things, we sort of become a chameleon to fit what we think the expectations are. And that is not an authentic life. That is not a powerful life. And that is a miserable life when you're constantly checking the environment, what is expected of me. Now, if you grew up in an abusive household, say alcoholism or something like that, very common that your day-to-day existence depended on your ability to be able to test the environment. And then what do I need to do in order to fit in that environment? That's incredibly toxic, right? And so if that's the case, that needs healing, and it can be healed. But sometimes just our insecurities, maybe we didn't really have a super toxic environment, but we we grew up in confusion, which is everybody to some degree, for sure. So in that place where we don't know who we are, we don't have a voice. We're not able to voice something we don't know, right? And so finding your voice is a process, and it's an ongoing process, right? And so much of the time in finding your voice is you need to find out what you're passionate about, and they're eternal things to be passionate about. And, sometimes when we're, a lot of times when we're growing up, we kind of get on bandwagons. And so we hop on this bandwagon, and this is what we're about. Okay. And then 6 months later, this is what we're about. And I'm saying now in those things, there's probably threads that are really true, right? That are the eternal things that you're about, that are really your voice. But the expression of it is changing. And sometimes we're just confused and we're just kind of all over the map. So when you find what you're passionate about, find the underlying things that you're passionate about. That would be really what your why is. Because it may not be, particularly, racial issues or this and that. Well, that's not an identity. Okay. That's an expression that you're passionate about justice. You're passionate about the expression of love on the planet that treats all people equally, with equal value and equal purpose. And when people are oppressed here, we're passionate there. But the underlying thing is not necessarily that expression, because your why will remain stable throughout your life. And it's a matter of discovery what that is. And there'll be a bunch of clues. I'm passionate about this. I'm passionate about this. I'm passionate about this. Well, the underlying thing that drives it all will be your why. And that's what will get you up in the morning. That is stable throughout your lifetime, but the expression of it, how that's expressed, will change. My why is all about knowing God is love and uncovering who we are in our identity in the image and likeness of love and walking out our purpose. That is my why. That is in everything I do. And I do a lot of different things. And it looks differently in its expression, but the driver is always the same. And that is where I have my voice. You can silence me on social media, but my voice is still there. You can't take it, because I know who I am. I'm not confused anymore. I used to be really confused, but I'm not confused because I keep on staring at the one who loved me and gave himself up for me. And he keeps revealing himself to me and revealing me to me and affirming the purposes that he plans for me before the foundation of the world. And that is why I get my voice. That's why on the days when I feel like it, awesome. On the days when I don't feel like it, it's amazing where it comes from. It just comes out of my being. Why? Because it's something eternal. It's something, because I'm an eternal being, that expression of that eternal purpose is empowered. And that's what happens. There's a supernatural empowerment that happens when you connect to these eternal things. And one of the things, when I was growing up in my confusion, I was constantly searching for what is eternal? I mean, because that's the only thing that's meaningful, right? So, I was a pretty deep little thinker. And it was interesting because I'll use my dad as an example. My dad, really brilliant, but incredibly messed up. I don't know how to say that. And so, and it would be the thing of the day. He would throw himself into the thing of the day. And this was the thing. And it was this constant instability. So we went into transcendental meditation, and then we were into this particular strict diet. And then it's all about African literature. And it's just all these crazy things. And, it's great to try on things. I'm not saying don't explore and whatever, but in terms of not having a stability about who you are so that you can enjoy different things and glean from different things, but not throw your entire identity into that, right? And so because of that, everything was incredibly unstable, right? And then in that, there are all sorts of gods that were set up. There is the god of humanism and the intellect. And there was a sexual expression, which was just like everywhere. It's like, oh my God, get it off me. And, there's crazy that happens because the value of who my dad was and who he was and his identity was not established. So he was just all over the map. And we are unstable when we do not know who we are. And then we don't have a voice that carries that supernatural empowerment because we don't know who we are. So finding your voice is all about finding who you are. So let's get some scripture to help us with this. So I'm going to go to Ephesians 2:10. And I'm going to read it from the Passion Translation. It says, "We have become his poetry, a recreated people that will fulfill the destiny he has given each of us. For we are joined to Jesus, the Anointed One. Even before we were born, God planned in advance our destiny and the good works we would do to fulfill it." Okay, so the thing is, the poetry of who you are, the poetry is the word poema. Most of the time it's translated as workmanship, which is great because it's all gorgeous. You are his poetry to the world. So what does that mean? That means the expression of the poetry of who you are has a voice. Poetry, whether you read it silently or you read it out loud, it has a voice. And so finding your voice, what fits me? And so many things do come to bear in that. Your gender comes to bear into that, and your and your culture that you grow up with, and your ethnicity, all of that comes to bear. But the eternalness of who we are is really where our voice is. So God's expression in our flavor is eternal. Okay. But a lot of times we make a bunch of things who we are that are really not who we are. You know what I mean? My fashion design is not who I am. My favorite hobby is not who I am. What I do is not who I am, right? My gender, my ethnicity, my sexuality is not who I am. Who I am is eternal and transcends all of that and has a unique expression. And so you're connecting to that voice and finding your voice in that will be that grappling with God in who you are. And really, and so which means it's something that you cultivate and you boil down over time and you find what fits. And it's interesting. And part of some of those clues will be from who you were when you were a little kid. And there were things that were like about you that were clues to who you are. And then the expression of that voice there were just clues of who you are, things you love, things you're passionate about, things that that light you up. Right? That's a connection with purpose. And in that purpose, you will have a voice. And, in your voice, understand the unveiling of the sons and daughters of God, the manifestation of the sons and daughters of God, there is a release from bondage. That's part of your purpose. And so as you express your voice out of the unveiled version of who you are, people are released from bondage. When I try to operate in someone else's purpose and I try to do that, it doesn't carry the weight, the eternal weight, the empowerment, the anointing, the grace that's someone else's purpose. But when I'm operating according to mine, I don't have to try. It is effortless. I don't have to try to be me. The struggle is in finding out who that is. And stepping out in who that is and releasing that voice. And so, if you've been harmed and if there's been abuse and things like that, finding your voice can be incredibly difficult, but it is doable. I had no voice. And some of my earliest encounters with God, where there were devastating scenarios where I didn't have a voice. I've listed some of these testimonies in my Marked by Love book. But, literally, in the destruction, in the wake of the abuse that had happened to me, I literally was a little girl with two eyes crying with no mouth because I had no voice. So that was kind of where I came from to get a voice. How good is God at restoring his sons and daughters? And so finding the things that light you up and that are eternal things are going to be the things where your voice is expressed. What are the things that you're passionate about? What about the things that make you angry? What are the things that that cause you to dream? What are the things that inspire you? All of these things are in line with your purpose. And you think about the quotes that inspire you. Well, there's something in that is an expression. Now, that may be someone else's voice, someone else's expression, but you may be resonating with that. So there's an expression of that you have to carry. And so finding your voice is so important. And it's important that you step out in it. Once you find your voice and the authenticity of who you are, once you find that voice, well, then it takes some bravery to step out and express that voice. Now, let me just say this. Your voice will be lovely. Now, I want to be very clear what I mean when I say that, because sometimes if you think about the voice of God, sometimes God is angry about things. Now, he's not beating butt, so he's not the thunderbolts and judgment and punishment, but he's angry at things that molest his kids because he's love. Of course he is. You mess with my kids, it's not going to look pretty. But that's what love is. Now, when love is punitive, when love is offended, that's wrong. When it's punitive and offended, it's not love, because love is not punitive and love is not easily offended. So sometimes we have to be clear that in expressing our voice, that we kind of are dealing with our own stuff, because in the expression of that lovely voice, sometimes it may be correction. Sometimes it may be kind of a hammer, because some things need to be hammered. I mean, I don't know about you, but there have been times in my life where God has really had to hit me over the head. Not often, but I needed it. It's like, oh, okay, thanks. I needed that, right? I mean, there are times, sometimes the voice is a whisper and is gentle. Love will always be kind, but it may not always be comfortable. And so in that expression of your voice, if it's a shrill voice, it's probably not the voice of love, because anger that is shrill rather than anger that is righteous, okay, there's a difference. Where we're offended, okay. Now, I'm not saying I'm offended by evil, but offended with people, that's another thing. Okay. And so we have to understand where love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, does not boast, it is not proud, it is not rude, it keeps no records of wrongs, it does not delight in evil, but rejoices in the truth, it always protects, trusts, perseveres, love never fails. The voice is going to be an expression of that. And within that range, there's a myriad of expressions, one of which is your voice. And sometimes the tenor of your voice will change. Absolutely. Sometimes in love, my voice is loud. And sometimes in love, my voice is soft. Sometimes in love, my voice is angry. Sometimes in love, my voice is healing. But it will always be a voice of love that seeks to build up and lift up and remind people of who they are. Because if my voice is condemning, it's not the voice of God. If my voice is about having to puff myself up and remind people just how great I am, love is not puffed up. But I may need to say, like, way to hold your horses. Excuse me, I'm sure you didn't mean to talk to me like that, because that was really belittling, and that's not okay. So if you want to rephrase that, that'll be great. Or if you want to be, if this conversation may be done until you can be respectful, okay, but that's not puffed up. That's just saying, you know what, I'm a person of value. I expect you to act honoring, yeah, and not belittle me. But sometimes sometimes the voice of love is silent, because sometimes that voice, people, there are times to address things and times to not address things. When I was talking about sometimes people when their voice has been silenced, they either lose their voice or sometimes they're screaming all the time. Well, let me just say this. If you are screaming all the time, you've not found your voice, because what's happening is that you're trying to express something, but there's no power behind it. So you're screaming all the time. And I'm saying, in the place where you're connecting with eternity and who you are, sometimes you don't need to speak. Okay. And that doesn't take away your voice. It's just there's timing. There were many times like, okay, so you think I'm demonized. right. Okay. I'm just not going to address that. Why? It was not helpful. He didn't need to justify himself. He didn't need to prove himself. And if you have to prove yourself all the time, apparently you're not that secure in who you are, because you can't let other people maybe have a false opinion of you and be okay in your own skin, because you know who you are. It's like, well, if you don't get me, guess you don't get me. Whatever that is, it doesn't change a dang thing. It just means you don't get me. And I don't need to have you get me in order for me to be okay. So sometimes your voice doesn't need to parade itself. And that's part of being secure in who you are. But we all have a voice. It's necessary for having a voice. And then we all are in our voice, are led by the Spirit with how to express that, when to express that. And then sometimes we just need to be quiet and listen to other people's voices. That other people's voices don't make ours any less. And some of us, and we've all had the issue of, I don't know if they all have the issue. A lot of people, if they've had this issue, and I know I've had this issue, when I had to battle to get my voice, right? It was really hard for me to sit on my hands, and I found like I had to talk all the time, right? You know what I mean? And this was just part of my process. It was kind of obnoxious. And every now and then I can fall into that. So if you think I've got this perfect, let me just disabuse of you right now. Because I just had to speak it, because I finally found it and I didn't want to lose it. Right. And so I wasn't secure in my voice. And that was just part of my process. And honestly, it's kind of being immature in that. And that's okay, because we all have processes. But if you constantly need to speak, oh my God, give someone else the mic and let them speak. Right. And just sit and listen, because, you probably already know what you think. So it might be helpful to let someone else say something. So we all have our development in that. If you've lost your voice, you may be in the phase where you have to speak all the time just because you're trying to get secure in that voice. Or if you speak something and then someone says something completely different and you cannot handle it. Well, you know what? Everyone has the right to have a different opinion than you and me. They just do, even if they're wrong. Because I don't know how, we all know that there are times when I thought I was so right and you thought you were so right and we were flat out wrong. So we need to have the humility, and it needs to be okay for someone else to let it lie. Okay, so they won the argument, right? The most important thing is protecting relationship. And sometimes you just need to shut up to protect the relationship and let it be where it is. And it's okay. And trust God in the process. That you can trust God in the process. That you're not threatened by other people's voices or threatened by other people's perspectives. And it's interesting, when we can do that, we can actually learn from people's perspectives. Even if we don't agree with where they're coming from, there's always something to learn. Why? That person is created in the image and likeness of love. There are things that are eternal and absolutely tracking with them. And in their voice, there's something in that is an expression of who they are. That is really valid. And so if we can just relax, we can glean that. But if we're screaming at each other, nobody gleans anything. Nobody gets anything. We're just wafting air. at each other and promoting rancor and division and all the yucky stuff that we don't like. So there's a way to handle our voice. And in expressing that voice, we need to be led in that, and develop in that, and grow in that, and be willing to be wrong. Sometimes we're just wrong, and sometimes we're right, but we need to let others be wrong and just give it a rest. We can entrust people to God. We really can. He's actually really masterful at his job in redeeming all things and giving you places for expression, right? Anyway, I hope this has been a blessing for you today. I hope that it helps you find your voice. Your voice needs expression, and it's beautiful, and it's powerful, and it's life-giving. And I want to hear your voice. So make sure you give me feedback. I want to hear from you. I love you guys. Have an amazing day.